Hey everybody, welcome to Mighty Grace Positive Gaming Podcast. And today we are going to talk about how to select video games for children and youth. And we have our podcast friends and Hawkeye, Brock, Kara, and Jace here together. Children and youth. I know nowadays a lot of children have been playing video games, starts probably 5 to 6 years old, youngest. And it seems like more and more children are playing video games, and of course youth as well, based on like different platforms and to their phones and 2DS and 3DS and PlayStation or Xbox. So it came to an awareness that for parents or teachers or ministers, it's it's important to choose the right games for them. So we're going to talk about this today, and we have friends from different backgrounds, different occupations. We have children ministers and um, children after school administrators, and we have youth pastors. We have life coach and counselors and therapists. So we're hoping to just brainstorm on these topics together. And okay, so first question I would like to ask y'all that why it is important to choose the game to children and youth. To your opinion, why this is important to you?
Who wants to go first?
Well, honestly, Karen, I think that may be a question that you would best be served to kind of answer, since you have seen the impact of that the most in your counseling career. What do you find is important in selecting games for children and youth? Do you see some standout issues?
Yeah, I think, let's see. I At my work, to be honest, I work with different ages and I do testing, psychological testing and counseling every day. And one of the things that I notice is that um, more and more children and youth and even young adults have their hobby written as playing video games. And when I ask, some of them are playing very violent or cruel or severe language-based video games, and at that indirectly give them the wrong impressions or negative impact. So I think it's important to provide guidance and help them to enjoy the hobby, but also not fall into the wrong path. That just my personal little 2 cents. And anybody else have agree, disagree, or any other opinions on this one?
Um, I mean, as a youth pastor, um, and not necessarily, I didn't get my doctorate or a master's degree in psychology. However, I did get an associate's degree, if that counts for anything. Um, there are definite stages in childhood and adolescence and behavior and in development, and uh, for sure we have responsibility as parents and as caregivers and as teachers, um, to guide the children and to take into consideration where they are in that development and what they can and should be um, uh, opened up to or taught. I do feel like technology, it has definitely, my 46 years of life. Back when I was a kid, we did have ColecoVision and we had Atari and Commodore 64, but it was not really as prevalent of a thing. Like, not every, first of all, I was like one of the only kids on my neighborhood that had those things. Most of the kids on my block, we all spent our time outside. You know, we were on our skateboards, we were climbing trees, we were on our bicycles in the dirt field. We were catching snakes and bringing them home and scaring our mothers. Um, uh, so it is a different time, and I think the technology is wonderful. I think it's really great. I love that there were things that I hated as a child, especially like going to the library and having to dig out encyclopedias and whatnot. Now you just get on there and Google it, although that's kind of a two-edged sword. Sometimes you get good information and sometimes you don't. But I do I teach normally third and fourth grade, but this past year it's been fifth and sixth. And I would overhear conversations of many of the children playing games that I completely disagree with it being appropriate for their age. Third and fourth graders should not be playing games that have extreme sexual content, nudity. I don't believe that they should be hearing all the vulgar language and the violence. It depends on what kind of violence it is, but the kind of violent games that they're playing are very grotesque and bloody. And for their age, there's the stage of development that they're in at this time, I really have reservations. I don't necessarily think that's going to lead them to be serial killers or anything like that, but it does hinder their development, I believe, in a way. But we can get into that more later, because I'm sure you just kind of wanted the wide stroke brush at the beginning here. But yes, I completely agree with what you said.
Yeah. I mean, you are, as the old saying goes, you are what you eat, right? And you're
Right.
letting people digest these things. You protect your kids from, movies, extreme sexual content or bloodiness. There's ratings on those. There's ratings on other things. I think there's this mentality, though it's definitely changed in the younger generations. Though the video games are kind of like cartoons for a lot of some of the older parents. I think there's a differentiation when you see that kind of the millennial generation and the younger generations now, they growing up with video games, they understand the difference. But I know a lot of older parents, or at least of maybe 10 years older than myself, um, that just kind of see it that way. They just kind of they'll put whatever in front of their kids and be like, "Oh, it's fine because it's just a child's thing." They understand it's not real, it's not fantasy, but the truth is they don't. Kids don't. The
Right.
reason God gave us as parents to be guiding, teaching the differences between these things to kids. We have one kid right now at the school I work with that she has been going around lately, thinking she has magic powers. That she has been watching things and think she can like control things with her mind. She really wills it to happen, and she doesn't quite get the difference between reality and fiction on that. I mean, she's trying to figure it out, but it's clear she doesn't quite grasp it. She's trying to think, oh well, if they can do this, maybe I can do this in real life. And she's starting to kind of think in herself that she's telling people, well, I can do this. I know I can do this. And we're having to explain to her, no, you can't. You really don't get this. And this is third grade, fourth grade, but still, you know, we have to be careful with what we do. We are the ones that have been given the position to lead children and help them learn and grow, and we are the ones the responsibility of protecting children. So, if you're not going to give your kid a snake to play with, then don't give them something else that can mess them mentally as well. That was probably a poor analogy at the end. But you know what I mean?
So wait a minute, I played with snakes when I was a kid.
Well, hopefully, it wasn't a moccasin.
No, they were just garden snakes and whatnot, really.
Yeah, I like snakes too as a boy. If that's okay.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. And then there's a huge movement. I know it's all over the United States specifically. I don't hear much about it going on in other countries as much. although some people have mentioned Scandinavia does to a degree. But down here in Southern California, they have this thing called free-range parenting. And what they believe is you just let your children discover life for themselves. You let them figure out on their own that if you go play out on the street that you could get ran over. You let them figure out on their own that if they touch a hot stove, they're going to burn their hand. You don't stop them from doing it. You let them do it and experience that, and then they'll learn not to do whatever activity it is. And they believe it's very, I know Mighty Grace will understand where I'm coming from with this, but it's very reminiscent of the late 1960s and early 70s with Dr. Spock, and not the guy on Star Trek. Would have been better. Vulcans had a better process of raising their children, I think. But anyway, I won't get too nerdy with Star Trek. You can damage a child's psyche by disciplining them in any way. Any kind of negative treatment of them is going to cause them to have depression in the future, and to have self-doubt, and to be unmotivated, and at the very worst possible even suicidal, because you spanked them, or because you sent them to the naughty spot or the naughty chair, or to their bedrooms, as was done with me when I was a child. And I just think that's utterly ridiculous. And I see a lot of those early forms of that philosophy from children who were born in the early to mid 90s when it first started. And the crime rates and whatnot are quite obvious in the way that those young adults and teens now interact with each other and with their elders. It is quite obvious that that was a failed experiment. And that we do absolutely, as human beings, need direction and need our elders in our, especially in our family circles, to guide us and show us, what wrong from right. And sorry, someone just knocked on the door and my dog's going crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about.
Yeah, with them just, it did used to be in the early 90s. It was still, if the parents were busy doing whatever, they would sit the child in front of the television. And I remember back then, there's a big hubbub about a lot of children were being sat in front of like Beavis and Butthead and Ren and Stimpy and that kind of stuff, which as an adult, I got a kick out of some of the episodes, and a metalhead as well. But but as a child, no, why you're going to let a kindergartner watch that? Really? And they just, they'll figure it out. No, I'm sorry. You have to guide your children. I mean, it's not just a biblical thing. It's psychology. It's science. We know this. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for everybody's opinion. So we all agree that it's important and we should be more careful on children and youth and how they select the games. So I would like to put Hot Eye into a little spot right now. And I would like to ask, during the process of selection games, what kind of element should be taken into consideration? Do you have any thought inside, Hawkeye?
I think, obviously the extremes, but I think a lot of people are probably already aware of that, or, well, at least you hope. So, extreme violence, extreme sexual content. But aside from that, I think it really is a question of knowing the child or the youth who you're buying for. Some things will really disturb some children, and while they don't others. And it may be a case of, obviously, if I'm getting a game for a young child, my criteria is going to be quite a bit different than if it's for a high schooler. I mean, by that time, I'm really expecting that they're going to make a lot of their own decisions. I mean, just sort of thinking back to my own childhood, my parents, I mean, even they provided some guidance when I was really young. But aside from that, they really expected me to make good decisions for myself, especially as I got older. So I think the most important thing is knowing the person that you're buying for, and if you don't, so like for me, I don't have my own children, but if I wanted to get a game for, say, a friend's child, I might talk to that parent before I do that. Or I might think about maybe giving a gift card and letting the parent and the child select something. Because I think, I mean, funny example, I guess, sort of, when I was really young, I could watch movies with a lot of fighting in them and be fine. I watched Old Yeller and had nightmares for 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
it really depends. So yeah.
I think you also need to take into account morals that are being taught. What are the values being taught in these games? If you can really delve into that a little bit more, yeah, you can look in the back and look at the ESRB and see if there's going to be, explicit nudity or sexuality, or if alcohol is used or drugs are used in an excessive manner. Those things will help you, but you really need to delve into the reviews and start looking about what are these games teaching, because ultimately they are teaching something. They're teaching some sort of life lesson. Most games are narrative to some point. Most of them are not just hack and slash. There are a few, but the vast majority is going to have some kind of story to it, some kind of plot. So what is this plot teaching? Is it teaching, what's it teaching about human values, identity? What's it teaching these children about how to deal with others? Are they learning to seek revenge when they've been hurt by someone? Or are they learning to love one another? Or like you can get all sorts of things. I could think of a ton of different games that have many, many different values with what you might be seeing. So yeah, I think those are all things that you really need to we need to start looking at more closely with, but that's obviously going to take effort. So that's something that you just kind of have to decide if you're going to do it or not.
It takes a fair lot of discernment as well, I think, because, I mean, you read reviews and like on one game, you can have like two totally opposing points of view, even within like Christian reviews, I think.
That's very true. Even, I mean, as far as the basic consideration, I think, again, loosely on age, because we do know that there's, like I said, there's different stages for sure. But it does have to deal, kind of like Hawkeye said, it does have to deal with the maturity of that specific child or teen as well. And obviously, like, there's going to be a difference between what a 10-year-old can handle and what a 16-year-old can handle, because there's a huge divide there, as I'm learning right now with 3 kids going into teenage years. And by the time that they are in their teenage years, they hopefully, because you have guided them and their teachers have guided them and their pastors have guided them, and grandparents and aunts and uncles, whoever else is around, and their social circle and family circle, they will have been given the instruments to make better choices, even up into their adult life, to where when they meet those temptations in high school, especially, and college, even more so if they And it doesn't really matter, by the way, if you go to a Christian school or even a seminary, there's still going to be some bad seeds in there, no matter where you go. Because I thought going to seminary that I was going to get away from, like, it was just going to be nothing but pure Christians in there. And I wish. There's still temptations there. And having grown up with stable parents and a family and friends who put me on the straight and narrow, less traveled path, did help without being overly strict to where I wanted to rebel. Although I certainly did rebel as a teenager to some degree, as we all do. Test your boundaries and your independence and develop that independence along the way. I still had that foundation that I was able to stand on that kept me grounded and kept me focused and out of trouble. But with the video games, we definitely need to look and be careful, like she just said, the discernment, because even I go to like Common Sense Media, not a sponsor, a lot to look at games. Not necessarily so much for games my kids are playing, because my kids pretty much have been playing the same video games for the last couple of years. My son just plays Fortnite and Apex, and I'm okay with that. But he's 11 years old, and he knows that this is a video game that you have to relieve stress and to have entertainment and to play with your friends and family. And you're not supposed to go breaking into places and getting guns and shooting people. And with Common Sense Media, it always says something at the very bottom that I actually appreciate, and that's that every game, no matter if it's Minecraft or it's Doom or GTA 5, as I was joking about earlier with Mighty Grace. No matter what it is, we should be sitting down with our children and we should be observing the games that they're playing and use those as teaching moments and bring up questions like, okay, that character just made that choice. Why? What impact do you think? Everything has a consequence. So what do you think the consequence is going to be of that? And like apply these things to real life. Now, some games are awfully silly and there's not much there, but other games, there's a lot to unpack that children are not going to unpack by themselves. And again, as was just said a bit ago, again, that's our job as parents and as leaders and elders to teach the children those life lessons and help them to have the tools to mentally unpack these things. What's good? What's bad? What can I get out of this? Are there life lessons in this that are positive, that are negative? And for a lot of storytelling type games, there's plenty there to help them with, I think. But yeah.
I think going back to something that Jaziel said earlier, just about the technology, I think in the past we've thought about video games as kind of almost an antisocial activity, which they really are not anymore. They're very social. And I think a lot of parents just don't realize that there really might even be an opportunity there for them to spend time with their children doing video games, even playing with them.
Right.
My dad has played with me before. He's not terribly good at it, but we have fun. So,
I can relate. I am horrible at Fortnite.
I will challenge that just a little bit. Part of the reason we're running this ministry that we're running is one of the things we find most common is that people who are playing video games a lot, we find a lot of loneliness among video gamers. And we like to say they're social, that we're interacting with people, but are we really? And how much are we really interacting with others on games like Fortnite or most games that are online in general? Even when in MMOs where we talk with our guildmates, how well do we really know our guildmates? Are we having physical interaction with people? I think there's definitely something to be said of that.
There is. No, you're absolutely correct, because I've mentioned this before. In fact, I think I've talked to you about it. It's been a while back, but where I was mentioning, I would say I grew up playing it, but it was more my high school and college years. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons. Back then, again, um, there was no internet up till I was in college. In fact, it was like my second or third year of college that I first had internet, and it was like there were no online games at that point, I don't think. Um, but I went from going over to someone's house or having a bunch of friends come over to my house. There'd be 8, 9, 10 of us around a table together. Um, some of us super nerdy, as is typically displayed on television or whatever, and some of us were professional types. But we would all, gather together, our Dr. Pepper and Doritos or whatever, Taco Bell, cheap food, and we'd spend 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 hours on a weekend playing together face to face, and then watching a hockey game, usually afterwards or whatever. That was just my group of friends. We were really into hockey as well, but we'd all sit there in the living room together. So many people that others had to sit on the floor. Went from that to, I think, around 1996 when like Rogue Spear came out. We all found out about this online game where you can get on and start, competitively shooting at each other and whatnot, and start playing Rainbow Six, the original Rainbow Six. And from then on, I went to EverQuest and World of Warcraft and all that. But there is definitely loneliness when you shut your computer off and all those people are just poof, they're gone, and you're there by yourself. And then you start wondering, when you get sick and your phone's not ringing, you're gone for like 3 days, and you're like, are these people really my friends? Like, are they thinking about me right now? I haven't been on I haven't been on Facebook. I haven't been on Twitter. I haven't been in the game for 3, 4, 5 days, maybe a week. And no one's contacting me on my phone. No one's sending me private messages. I'm not just speaking for myself here. I'm speaking also from people that I've, other fellow gamers. That is definitely a very lonely and isolating feeling. And it's sad because it's such, like I said earlier, it's such a great thing that we can connect online. This is a beautiful thing that we can talk to people from all around the world. That before it was just you and whatever group of friends that you could muster together in real life. And a lot of us introverts, it's pretty difficult to gather a group of friends because we're just kind of sitting in the corner, We're the boys and the girls that stand against the wall at the school dances, if we even bother going. Being online and being kind of anonymous in a way, you just have your avatar, and you can be a little skinny shrimp guy like I was at the time, but your character is a big giant muscular orc. It's a great thing. But yeah, it definitely, I felt that myself. I'm not too proud to say it. I felt that way at times when my daughter's been ill or I've been ill and in the hospital and haven't been able to get on the computer. And it does, after several days, you're like, no one's calling me, no one's checking on me, and then you finally do get on Discord or whatever, and no one's asking about you, no one's saying anything, and you're like, oh, hi everybody, does anybody remember me? So yeah, that's true. It exists. It's kind of off topic, I think. Sorry about that.
So for us, it's going to be a lot like kind of what David said. I grew up on the edge of video games and internet. I'm kind of that bit of a day walker when it comes to video games and technology versus not having it. To use I don't even know why I referenced Blade just now, but whatever. So I grew up with corded phones. There were no cell phones when I was a kid. We didn't have a computer until I was 12, maybe or so. I got my first console was an N64. But prior to that, a lot of my childhood was going out playing games with my friends, baseball in the yard, or tag, hide and seek, whatever you would have, riding bikes around the neighborhood. Okay, so yeah, so having that context, when we got into our teenage years, we started to do one of the main ways we got together was, well, we got together for a lot of things. We got together for a lot of parties. We played a lot of card games. One of the things we did with LAN parties, and we would get together. Our big game was Dawn of War. It's actually the first time I got into the Warhammer universe, of which I'm a huge fan now. And I do my modeling and my Necrons and everything else now. And Karen's getting into it. So I'm a huge fan of the Warhammer universe now. But that was our big thing. We literally would get together at our church. And this was not a church event or a church sanctioned event. One of our good friends worked at the church, which was the one we all grew up in, and had a key. And we would literally get there and come into a room at midnight. We'd set up our hub, pull all the wires out, hook up, get all our laptops out, and we'd stay there well into the AM playing Dawn of War matches and playing one another. And those are like some of my favorite memories growing up. It was so much fun. But then again, there was human interaction there. We're talking. We're close friends that already have relationships prior to that are established with that. And that's carried on into my adult years. Now we have our PS4s, and all of my friends have a PS4, and that's one of the main ways we still connect. We get together and we play games. They're playing The Division right now. Sadly, we couldn't afford to get that one, so we haven't done that one, but we've been doing Destiny in the past and other things. And it's just a great way for us to connect now that we have families and we can't get together like we used to when we were college friends. So, yeah, I mean, video games are a huge part of that, but I think the key part of being able to use the plus side of technology, the plus side of being able to Skype one another, is making sure you don't forget the necessities and the foundations that came prior to that. Making sure you continue to have that physical contact, that you do have that closeness, that you do have people you have deep conversations with and not just go raiding with. The raiding is an add-on. It is not the core game experience of having a friendship, if you will, right? So that would be my personal experience with that.
Yeah, I remember we did LAN parties, but I don't think we started till it had to have been 1998. And then really the biggest LAN parties we had were in 1999 when EverQuest came out. And gosh, man, I remember that my friend Ken, Ken Johnson, he's passed. He was an old Vietnam veteran. But I worked with him at on the ambulance for a while. Like I said, he passed away. He had a heart attack, but he got me started with EverQuest. And what he would do is he'd have these LAN parties at his apartment. He had this like 4-bedroom apartment, and we would all, like, there was 12 of us, I think. We would all like cart our computers into his apartment. That place was so hot because of all the computers running in there and improper ventilation. And we just opened up all the windows, and we'd connect all them up, and we would play. We all worked second shift, so we had Sunday, Monday, and Tuesdays off. We would get there Saturday night. We'd bring our sleeping bags and our pillow, and a hefty cinch shack, 40-pound bag full of food and snacks. And we would just hook our computers up, and he had this tier 1 line, which was just awesome back then. And we would just play all together. We had all 4 rooms and his living room full of just young men playing EverQuest together. And then we would take little breaks and play. Like I said, we would play Rogue Spear, Rainbow Six, and Unreal Tournament, and or I don't think Tournament was out yet, but we'd play Unreal and some of the other games like that. And man, that was just awesome. That was a great feeling because you were online playing with them, but you also were getting that camaraderie or whatever. You were getting that face-to-face fellowship with other people, and that was just an amazing time. But yeah, good memories.
So for those people who does not know that there's online references or tours will be able to help us. And if you go to esrb.org, and you'll be able to find different games reference. They have for everyone 10 plus age, for teen, mature, adult only, and rating pending. And for all the parents or ministers or even family members, and you want to buy games for children and youth, and this would be a very good reference and for what kind of contact you're looking for, what you want to avoid and what you absolutely don't want, and it would really help you to look at some references on alcohol, blood and gore, violence and drug use, fantasy violence, language and mature humor, nudity, sexual content, tobacco reference, and things like that. That will really help you to make your own decisions and see what your child or your teens may need. And my next question for everyone is that, to your personal experience as a person, have family members or youth or family members or children, or your positions as a administrator or minister as a youth or children's workers at church, how you gonna be a positive influence or guidance for them during the process?
In short, children are always going to dislike being told what they can and cannot play, as well as what they can and cannot watch, what they can and cannot listen to, and that's just part of the learning process. And as they get older, again, hopefully you will have taught them and given them that foundation, given them those tools to be able to make better decisions when they're older. And honestly, with like I said, with my 3rd and 4th graders and 5th and 6th graders this year, I just, because I'm not their parent, I think this is going to sound horrible, but it's true. They kind of give me a little bit. They listen to me a little bit better because the mom and dad are not necessarily the enemy, but mom and dad are the strict ones and whatnot, and I'm just the cool guy that they see on Wednesdays and Sundays, and the cool old guy that plays video games like them. And so I kind of get to be the cool uncle in a way, if that makes any cultural reference or whatnot. But I feel like with that I have a little bit better ability to reach them and let them know, hey, your mom and dad are just really, they're trying to keep you safe. There's a lot of ugliness in the world, and they're trying to teach you so that ultimately they will no longer have to protect you from it, but you will be able to protect yourself from it. And there are certain things in life that your brain needs to figure out, and you need to learn how you can absorb these things and take these things in, and what to do with them. And right now you don't have the reference or the ability to do so. And in most cases, at least with me, the children are fairly well receptive of that, and they kind of get it. They still don't like it. They'd still rather do whatever they wanted to, go watch that rated R scary movie that they saw a preview for on TV or whatever. I know a lot of because I mostly teach boys, and I know a lot of them want to see like the real scary movies, like what was that one that came out a couple of years ago? Annabelle, I think it was. They're like, "Oh, that looks so cool." I'm like, "You're not ready for that, dude." I'm 46. I watched it, and I couldn't sleep for a night. But as a parent, it is rough. There's definitely a difference between when I tell my children that's those same exact words, and when I tell other people's children those same exact words. I see a big difference. So I try to take that opportunity to teach both, but understanding that my children are probably going to listen to an aunt or uncle or a grandparent or one of the pastors at church a little more.
Yeah, I agree with you wholesale that first of all, we need to set the standard. We need to be examples for them. We need to live above reproach. We cannot tell or say anything or expect anything of anyone that we're not ourselves not willing to do. I think a great example of this is me, and I'll be with a lot of my friends when it comes to things like Game of Thrones. I know we're talking about video games, but there's a great example right there of something extremely popular in the culture that I will not be a part of because of the content that's in it. It clearly goes against us and our faith, and what we believe, and exposing ourselves to certain things. And then I've had kids, just because I'm an adult and I can watch this, and I say, I don't watch this. And they're like, well, why don't you do these things? And then there's an opportunity for an example, for a great conversation for us to be had, as why do we choose not to do certain things? As Paul said, I can do all things and not all things are beneficial for me. So we can talk about why we don't watch certain movies or why we don't go see Deadpool. I know that's been super popular with a lot of youth and teenagers as well. And they see it as a really cool thing. And I understand, I read Deadpool comics back when I was a kid, and I can tell you right now why I don't do that anymore as an adult, which is the complete opposite. It's like you would think, oh, you couldn't do that, so you should do it now. No, I did that, but I don't do it now because I've gotten more mature. So yeah, I agree completely. And then as far as being a children's minister, I would say definitely working with the parents is a big thing. That part of that ministry, just to not just talk about what we're doing with our own kids, but as far as specifically in being a minister, it's very important to partner with the parents, to work with the parents, to have time with them, the relationship with them, help them in raising their own children, so that we are on the same page together as a team as much as we can be. We're not going to dissolve the truth of the gospel. I do have some parents that I don't agree with, and we're not going to come to an agreement with. A few that are willing to bring their kids to a church that they themselves are not Christian. So we're not going to have agreement on that, but I can still be a good example, and I can still teach their children to honor their parents, even if we don't agree with them in every way. So yeah, there's definitely a few key areas on that, but I agree with what David said. So
yeah, and you just said something else that sparks kind of flashes of interactions I've had with other parents that have been dropping their children off or picking them up, where there are cultural differences. And like Grace, you were talking about the ESRB, which is a good guide, but again, with cultures, some people have no problem with alcohol being presented in video games, and nudity even, which gets me. But I know that there are cultures around the world who differ on what they find acceptable for children and not. I mean, even as an example, when I was growing up, at the age of 8, you're allowed to have 6 ounces of red wine with your dinner. And I know most Americans right now, maybe even some of you, just heard that and went, "Oh my gosh, what? No." And it's like, well, in a lot of European countries, that is not, you don't do it to get drunk or whatever. And in some countries, especially the poorer ones, that's preferable over drinking the water that's coming out of their tap, believe me. I've been there, seen that. But I didn't myself do that because my parents were, well, my mother was Mormon, so no alcohol, no caffeine. So we had water, we had juice, we had milk. But I know a lot of the children I was raised with who were Irish and Scottish families and Norwegian and, broadly Scandinavian, were allowed to. And I always thought, oh, that's kind of weird, isn't that? Don't you get drunk on that? No. But I mentioned Common Sense Media, and I know there was another one that, Grace, you had shared a while back, and I added to my favorites. For some reason, it's escaping my.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gifts
Right.
of the Grace, and also Beneath the Tangle. They also provide Christian reviews.
Right. Okay. That was it.
There's Plugged In as well. I know they do more movies, but I have seen them do
Yeah.
some video games.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, the cultural thing is a touchy thing because it's like, well, I mean, the Bible is fit for everyone. So anything that would go against what our Holy Scriptures say should be universal. God spoke to all of us, every one of us. It doesn't matter if you're from China or Istanbul or United States or Madagascar. It doesn't matter. God is God and Jesus is Jesus, and what they taught through the apostles and the judges and all the men and women of the scriptures is absolutely what we should follow, no matter what your culture says is appropriate. Not because if we went by what our culture here in North America says is appropriate, we would definitely not be following Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear you 110% on that, man. Just to throw that in there in 2 cents, I worked at a Chinese church, and the Chinese card got played a lot. And we talk about with kids and parents talking about discipline or something and come up with an issue, and we talk about like why this is not working for their child. They said, "Oh, well, we're Chinese though. We don't do things that way." We're like, "Come on, you are a Christian first. That is your identity." Right. Not Chinese, not American anymore. You are a Christian first. So what is God's standard? Not what is the American standard, not what is the Chinese standard. What is God's standard? I agree with you completely.
Right. And what you had said about kind of letting letting the scripture guide you and making those decisions. And as you do mature, again, you are an example of it. I'm an example of it. We all are. But as you do mature, you do get to a place where you're like, I can do this. I'm an adult. I'm 18. I'm allowed to go I can watch rated R movies. I can go get on the computer and go to adult websites. I'm free to do that. I have freedom to do that, at least here in North America. Maybe not in China, but here in North America. But is that good for me? Is that the right thing for me to participate in spiritually, mentally, even physically? How is that going to affect me? What is that going to do once it gets inside of my mind? Is it going to poison me? Is it toxic? Or is it going to bring me closer to God? And rounding it back and bringing it back to video games, that is absolutely something we need to take into consideration, just as much as we do, like you said, Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad was one that I got into for a long time and, questioned there. Game of Thrones is definitely a biggie though right now, although tonight is the last episode and then they're done. So that's
there are already spin-offs confirmed.
Oh, that's okay. I stand corrected. I remember them saying there's like 2 or 3. And it's too bad too, because it'd be a fantastic show if they could tone the language down, and the nudity is unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
The sexuality and whatnot.
I have heard the term boobs and blood used to describe the series by non-Christian people multiple times. That's
Yes.
Always, it's like, you realize, even as non-Christians, you realize what you're getting. So
yeah, I'm not going to judge anyone, but I will say, for my personal journey, that I didn't find that it was, I don't know if conducive is the proper word here, but it definitely is not helping me grow as a Christian. It definitely is not bringing me closer to God. And there does have to be a line there. And again, I really appreciate that I was given that foundation as a child and as an adolescent and a teen, and even into my 20s. I had elders, I had family, I had friends who helped guide me, and pastors who helped guide me and give me the tools that I could have to now make better decisions for my spiritual walk and for my mental health as well. Important that this is an example of someone who had that foundation, and we need to be giving that foundation to our children. That's why this topic is so much more important than people understand, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for anyone tuning in with this and watching this, I think one thing and we should have said this at the very beginning of the podcast, really, this is not to pass judgment on anyone. This is not to say that you're a bad parent or anything in life, no matter what you do or choose to do or where you're at. That really, I think that the point that we're trying to come out is to ask the question of, we should all be asking the question constantly of, why are we doing what we're doing? What is the path this is leading? Something that's come up recently in a church sermon we talked about is we choices we make are, and this is true for anything, you just think about it for a minute, choices we make are not just singularity choices in that moment. Ultimately, it's a path you're taking. It's a route you're choosing to go today that's going to lead you further down a certain path. Is the path you are taking today the path that you want to be on? Where does it lead? And is that ultimately a destination that you want to visit? And that's really what it comes down to. None of us are perfect. We are all broken. We all make mistakes. I already mentioned I read Deadpool for a period of time. Like I've done my deeds, and Deadpool's not just it. I've done far worse. So I promise you, I've done really, really bad stuff in my life too. So yeah, that's just to throw that in there as a caveat at the end of this. I wish we had said that at the beginning, but we're all in this together. So let us help one another to grow and to become the better people that we need to be in this life.
Right.
So, would each one of you name a couple games that you think is absolutely family friendly and is absolutely good for the children and the youth? Just a couple of games that you notice. It could be any platforms if you want. Yeah.
Any first party Nintendo games, always family friendly.
Yeah, what age group are we talking here? Because Nintendo, I completely agree with that. Almost everything they put out is good for all ages. And I see Sanyo posting some games I really like. You're getting some brownie points, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
definitely.
Zelda games are awesome. Metroid Prime, definitely. I mean, I hesitate to mention Minecraft, but it is. I know it's overplayed, or most people are sick of it by this point. But although I saw Minecraft Earth is coming to the cell phones now, which looks interesting. But I would say even like city builder games. What was that farm game that you and I used to play, Arden? Farm Simulator, I think it's called. I mean, it sounds boring as heck, but it is actually really fun. I am not kidding. Just try it. If you get a free preview weekend or something, there's also like the European truck driver game. I can't remember specifically what it's called. That was
Euro Trucker, I believe.
Yeah. I believe there's an American version too, but I heard it's not as good. I only played the Euro one. But definitely like city builder games like City Skylines or Surviving Mars. I mean, those games are definitely good for all ages. I mean, I even find some of them fun at my age. I'm an old guy. But I mean, as far as younger children and childhood under the age of 10, 11, I would say that anything that helps kind of stimulate problem solving and creativity is definitely a huge bonus. And that's where I would focus. I mean, when my kids were in that age range, that's what we were playing was mostly Minecraft, I think. But yeah, it was all things that I knew would stimulate their mental growth, and like I said, that would help them express to their creativity and problem solving skills, overarching. And then as they got into their preteen years, which they're in now, although two of them are teens, but one preteen behind me. I guess he's still behind me. um, I as far as like first person shooters and whatnot, I try to stay away from the ones that are super gory and have a lot of vulgar language. Um, yeah, and there's Call of Duty and Battlefield. Unfortunately, and there's no way to there's no filters. They're just like, well, it is what it is. There's no language filter. There's no blood and gore filter, as far as I know, unless they added them in lately. So I stick to most of the battle royale type games that he enjoys. Apex, I think, is fine. And I really don't have a problem with Fortnite. I mean, I personally don't like battle royale games, but that's not because of the content necessarily. It's just that's not my play style. But I don't have a problem with him playing them. He knows we've talked about the games, and he knows not to, like I said earlier, he knows not to go out and reenact those activities. Hopefully he's learned that. I haven't seen him packing any M16s or anything in his bedroom yet, so.
Gotcha. Well, let's see. I would totally agree with everybody on the games. If anybody want to play like family-friendly games, and Nintendo definitely a good choice. And also some of the co-op games like Little Big Planet or all the Lego series, Zelda, Mario, Rayman, and Plants vs. Zombies is very cartoony. and even Overcooked series, they're pretty good. So, and some of the city building games like Civilizations, they're pretty good. Like board game type, like Childhood Light and Emerald, that's pretty good as well. So, I think, and our conversation today is coming to close to the end. So I would like to close this up with some of the scriptures. For example, like Proverbs 22, verse 6, train up a child the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. And I think that is our responsibility as parents, as ministers, as individual who has family and friends who are children and youth. And I hope this conversation can sparkle some of the thoughts that's in your hands. If you see any children or youth playing games, that you ever thought about how you could be a positive influence to them. And I hope this conversation today would help you in any ways that to think more about God, to think about the relationship with God, to think about how we can be more positive, encouraging for their relationship with God and their faith and through video games. And that is absolutely a wonderful, awesome conversation today. I thank you for everybody who is here and look forward to hear anybody's feedback. All right. So thank you so much for listening and watching today, and see you next time.